Hello, everyone. Welcome back to today's story. In this episode, we follow Lytudiep and James as they face one of the most critical moments of their lives. When a woman suddenly appears, claiming to be Nie's grandmother, Diep's heart fills with fear and doubt. Determined to protect the child she's raised with love, Diep turns to Mr. Lee for help in verifying the woman's identity. What begins as a simple investigation soon becomes a test of trust, courage, and maternal devotion. As Mr. Lee uncovers a shocking truth that the woman isn't Nie's real grandmother, Diep must confront both her relief and her anger. Stay with us until the end to witness this emotional journey. And don't forget to subscribe to help us reach 10,000 subscribers. Your support truly means the world to us. The warm glow of the small eatery flickers softly, painting Lytudiep's face in shades of gold and amber. She sits quietly, her fingers circling the rim of her glass, lost in thought. "We can't take chances," she murmurs, her voice steady but heavy with concern. "If that woman truly is Nie's grandmother, we need to know for sure." The words linger in the air, drawing a deep silence between her and James. Across the table, James nods slowly. "We'll find the truth, Diep," he says, his tone calm but purposeful. "But remember, whatever we uncover, Nie's happiness comes first." His words bring a faint smile to her lips, yet it's a smile trembling on the edge of fear. Lytudiep gazes down at her plate, the food untouched. Memories of Nie's laughter flood her mind, her tiny arms reaching out for hugs, her sleepy whispers at night. "If she chooses her grandmother," Diep whispers, "I'll let her go." The strength in her voice wavers, the truth cutting deeper than she admits. As long as she's happy, that's enough. James studies her closely. He can see through the brave front. The woman before him is torn between love and duty, clinging to a calm that could shatter at any moment. "We'll get through this," he says gently. "You, me, and Nye. We've already been through worse." The air hums faintly, with quiet conversation around them, but their table feels like its own small world. The scene holds still for a breath. Lytudiep, her glass trembling slightly as she sets it down, the faint clink echoing her inner turmoil. She knows she can't let her emotions cloud what's best for the child, yet her heart aches at the thought of losing Nye. When the waiter refills their tea, James breaks the silence. "Mr. Lee's our best option. He's handled cases like this before." Lytudiep nods. "I'll contact him tomorrow. I just hope the truth isn't too painful." The next morning, the hum of traffic fills the air outside Mr. Lee's office. Sunlight spills through the glass door as Lytudiep and James step in, greeted by the calm, composed man behind the desk. "It's been a long time," Mr. Lee says, with a warm but measured smile. Lytudiep doesn't waste a moment. "Mr. Lee, there's something urgent," she begins, her tone clipped but trembling slightly. "A woman has appeared, claiming to be Nie's grandmother. We need to verify her identity." James leans forward, his voice firm. "We just want to make sure Nye is safe, that she's not being taken into an unstable situation." Mr. Lee nods, his expression sharpening with quiet understanding. "I'll look into it. Give me her phone number, any details you have." He flips open a notepad, pen poised. "If everything goes smoothly, I can have results within a couple of days. Lytudiep exhales, her shoulders relaxing slightly. Still, her fingers tremble as she passes over the paper. This isn't just another case for Mr. Lee. It's the fate of a child she's grown to love as her own. I'll start right away, Mr. Lee assures. And I'll keep this matter confidential. His confidence carries weight, but the uncertainty still hangs in the room like a shadow. Lytudiep and James thank him and leave, stepping into the bright sunlight outside. Yet for all the warmth around her, Lytudiep feels cold inside. I trust him, she says softly. But I'm scared, James. What if the results say she's really Nye's grandmother? James reaches for her hand. Then we'll do what's right for Nye, whatever that means. That night, back at the farm, the golden hour washes over everything. The newly grown crops, the wooden fence, the house that smells faintly of jasmine and earth. Lytudiep stands at the edge of the field, her gaze lost in the distance. Without Nye, this place wouldn't feel alive, she says quietly, brushing a hand over a budding row of vegetables. James joins her, his voice warm. She's your world, I know. He pauses, then adds, but Diep, maybe it's time to start something new too. You've got knowledge, experience, connections with the farmers around here. What if you started a small agricultural brand? Something that's yours? Lytudiep turns to him, eyes uncertain. You really think I could do that? James smiles. You've already built this farm from the ground up. You just need to take the next step. And if you're worried about money, don't be. I'll invest in you. His words land gently, like sunlight breaking through clouds. For the first time in days, Lytudiep laughs softly. You always make things sound easy. They are, James says, chuckling. If you stop doubting yourself. The scene slows. The wind moves softly through the crops, carrying the faint scent of soil and rain. Lytudiep looks out at the horizon where the sun begins to sink. A strange calm settles over her. Maybe it's time, she says finally. Not to replace what I've lost, but to grow beyond it. James places a hand on her shoulder, his touch steady. That's the Diep I know. But even as her resolve grows, a shadow lingers. If Nye goes, it'll feel like losing a part of myself. James doesn't answer immediately. He watches her quietly, letting her words hang in the cool evening air. We'll face it together, he says at last. The final light of day touches her face, golden and fragile. Lytudiep stands there for a long moment, her expression a mix of strength and sorrow, ready to fight for the child she loves, yet knowing the truth might break her heart. That night, as they walk back toward the house, fireflies flicker across the fields. The soft hum of crickets fills the silence between them. Lytudiep whispers, almost to herself, I just want her to be safe. James glances over. She will be. Mr. Lee won't let us down. Lytudiep nods, but deep down, she knows. Some truths can change everything, even the most carefully built peace. Inside the house, the faint smell of dinner greets them. Nye's laughter drifts from the living room, pure and bright. For now, it's enough to soothe Lytudiep's heart, to remind her that this moment, this small, fleeting happiness, is worth protecting. Outside, the night deepens, and somewhere in his office, Mr. Lee begins his investigation. He doesn't know yet that the truth he's about to uncover will shake everything lytudiep and James believe about Nye's past and her future. Morning light filters softly through the window, streaking across the wooden floor. The house is quiet. Too quiet. Lytudiep sits at the table, hands wrapped around a warm cup of tea, her eyes fixed on the phone resting beside her. It's been 2 days since she handed Mr. Lee the contact number. Every tick of the clock feels like a drumbeat of suspense. James enters, his hair still damp from the morning wash. "No word yet?" he asks gently. Lytudiep shakes her head. "Not yet. He said he'd call once everything's confirmed." Her voice wavers, caught between hope and dread. "What if we've been wrong about everything, James?" James pulls up a chair beside her. "Then we'll deal with it." "But you've done the right thing, Diep. We needed to know the truth." Before she can respond, her phone buzzes sharply, breaking the silence. The name Mr. Lee flashes across the screen. Lytudiep freezes for a second, then answers with trembling fingers. "Hello? Ms. Lytudiep?" Mr. Lee's voice is calm, but carries an unmistakable gravity. "I've completed the verification. Can you and Mr. James come to my office now?" Lytudiep's heart skips. "We'll be there in 15 minutes. The drive to the city feels endless. Rain clouds gather overhead, mirroring the weight in their hearts. Neither speaks much. Every word feels too heavy. When they finally arrive, Mr. Lee's office is silent except for the soft hum of an air conditioner. He stands by the window, arms crossed, the usual calm on his face, replaced by something unreadable. Lytudiep swallows hard. "Mr. Lee, what did you find?" He turns slowly, his eyes meeting hers. "I verified everything. The woman's name, her background, her supposed connection to Nye." He pauses, the silence cutting through the room like a blade. "She's not Nye's biological grandmother." The words hit like thunder. Lytudiep grips the edge of the chair, her heart pounding. "You're sure?" "Absolutely," Mr. Lee replies firmly. "Her documents were fabricated. The family she claimed belonged to Nye doesn't even exist in the registry. She's unrelated by blood." James exhales, a mix of shock and relief flooding his expression. "So she lied?" Mr. Lee nods. "Yes. I believe her motive was financial. There's evidence she's been contacting multiple families claiming distant kinship, attempting to gain guardianship of children for money or benefits." Lytudiep's stomach twists. How could someone do that? To a child? Mr. Lee's tone softens. "It happens more often than you'd think. But the good news is, Nye's safe. She stays with you." The words finally sink in. Lytudiep's shoulders tremble as tears blur her vision. Relief washes through her like a wave, but beneath it, anger brews quietly. All this time, she made me doubt myself. James reaches for her hand, squeezing gently. "What matters is, it's over." Mr. Lee slides a folder across the desk. "This has the evidence you'll need in case she tries to come back. I've already contacted the authorities. They'll keep an eye on her." Lytudiep nods, her throat too tight for words. She rises slowly, bowing her head in gratitude. "Thank you, Mr. Lee. You didn't just help us. You protected Nye." He smiles faintly. "You're a good mother, Miss Lytudiep. Never doubt that." Outside, the clouds begin to break. The first ray of sunlight pierces through as they walk toward the car. For the first time in days, Lytudiep feels like she can breathe again. On the drive back, James glances at her. How do you feel? She exhales deeply, looking out the window at the passing rice fields. Like I've just been given nigh all over again. Her voice trembles with emotion. I don't think I've ever been this scared or this grateful. James smiles softly. You deserve peace, Diep. Back at home, the farm hums with life. The green rows shimmer under the afternoon light, and Nee's laughter echoes from the courtyard. When she sees them, she runs forward, arms wide. Mommy! Uncle James! Lytudiep kneels, gathering her into a tight embrace. Oh, my sweet girl, she whispers, her voice breaking. Mommy missed you so much. Nye giggles, unaware of the storm that just passed over her life. She twirls around, showing off the small bracelet she made from flowers. Look, I made this for you. Lytudiep presses the bracelet to her heart. It's beautiful. I'll keep it forever. Mrs. Huyen steps out from the kitchen, smiling warmly. You're back early. How did it go? James exchanges a look with Diep. Everything's settled. Nye stays right here, where she belongs. Relief floods Mrs. Huyen's face. Thank heavens. She gestures toward the dining table. Come, eat something. You both look exhausted. The aroma of warm soup and freshly cooked rice fills the room. Lytudiep sits quietly for a moment, watching Nye chatter as she eats. For the first time, the heaviness in her chest begins to lift. After dinner, James steps outside to check the fields, leaving Diep and Nye alone. The child climbs onto her lap, nestling close. Mommy, why are you crying? Lytudiep smiles through her tears. Because I'm happy, sweetheart. Mommy's just really happy today. The little girl nods, satisfied with the answer, and drifts off to sleep against her shoulder. Later that night, when the moonlight spills across the farm, Lytudiep stands by the window, gazing out at the silver glow over the fields. James joins her quietly, his presence grounding. She's sleeping? He asks. Diep nods. Peacefully. James leans on the windowsill, his voice low. You did the right thing, Diep. You fought for her. Diep turns to him, eyes glistening. I didn't just fight for her. I fought for us, for the home we're building, the family we're becoming. James's gaze softens. You've got strength, Diep, more than you realize. Outside, the wind stirs the leaves, carrying the faint scent of blooming citrus from nearby trees. The air feels lighter now, clean, renewed. Lytudiep closes her eyes for a moment, whispering into the night, Thank you, Mr. Lee. Because of him, the truth came to light. Because of him, Nye could stay where she truly belonged. And for the first time in what feels like forever, Lytudiep smiles without fear, knowing that this home, this life, and this love are real.